Welcome to the first panel of the last day of our History and Social Science Festival. And I'm very happy to have the opportunity to moderate a panel with two such very distinguished guests, which I will introduce in a minute. As you have seen in the program, our panel today revolves around economic freedom and the limitation of economic freedom. And this is a topic which has popped up here and there in earlier discussions during this festival already. Today we will focus on the notion of illiberal economies. This is a term which has become increasingly visible and even dominant in debates about the economic development, not only in East Central Europe, but also in the Balkan region and in the post-Soviet space during the past decade. Today, however, we will pay particular attention to the situation in Poland and Hungary. Poland and Hungary, as every attentive newspaper reader is aware of, are nowadays often mentioned in the same breath. Of course, one of the reasons is that both countries in the course of the past decade have attempted a kind of illiberal second transition, as it is often called, while being EU member states, which came as a surprise to many because Poland and Hungary so far counted among the most vocal advocates of economic and political liberalism after 1989. And of course, this development also contradicted the initial hopes of the EU enlargement in 2004, which rested on the idea that EU membership would accelerate and consolidate the transformation of the post-socialist countries towards liberal market economies and parliamentary democracies. This nexus between Poland and Hungary is also rests also on the thought that the transitional paths in some ways have been related since 1989, or at least entangled. In the 1990s, there was, as I learned, a popular saying in Hungary, namely that the fast train from Warsaw is arriving in Budapest, which hinted at the fact that reform ideas from Poland, like the shock therapy, were considered as trusted and efficient role models to follow. In the 2010s, on the other hand, the roles seem to have reversed. We remind ourselves of the fact that in 2011, after the lost elections, Jarosław Kaczyński of Prawo i Sprawiedliwość, of the party Law and Justice, I don't remember how if this is the translation in English, announced that soon we will have Budapest in Warsaw, which alludes to the fact that peace, tried at least to play on the playbook of the Orban government. So both countries are today often labeled as illiberal democracies, not democracies, but not dictatorships. That means democracies without the rule of law. And of course, there has been extensive media coverage, also in Austria and in other European countries, on the curbing of civil liberties of certain minority groups, of the dismantling of the rule of law, of the dismantling of the system of separated powers. But I think less known to the general public is the economic side of the model. In other words, how PiS and Fidesz have used their power to reverse wholly or partially the deregulation and liberalization of the national economies since the 2010s. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming two speakers whose professional expertise, but also personal experiences will help us to shed light on the roots and the nature of the current economic development in their home countries. And I will go here in the alphabetical order. We have on the screen, we can give a hearty welcome to Hanna Gronkiewicz-Waltz, who is joining us from Poland, as I assume, today. Hanna Gronkiewicz-Waltz is a professor of public and banking law at the University of Warsaw, but she also served as chair of the National Bank of Poland between 1992 and the year 2000. Then going on as the vice president of the London-based European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. This was a development investment bank founded in 1991 to support the economic transformation process in Central and Eastern Europe. Professor Gronkiewicz-Waltz also pursued a political career that should be mentioned as well. She served as member of the Polish Sejm for a period for the Civic Platform. And of course, as many people familiar with Poland know, she was the city mayor of Warsaw for a 12-year period between 2006 and 2018. Our second distinguished speaker today is Julia Király, who traveled over from Hungary to be with us here today, which we are very happy for. Professor Király is an economist by training, but she has not only pursued an academic career in the 1990s, if I understood correctly, you were also active in the private sector in the field of bank consultancy and professional training. She was also the co-owner and CEO of a consulting company in Budapest. Here's the parallel between our two speakers. Professor Király was deputy governor responsible for financial stability at the Central Bank of Hungary between 2007 and 2013, and also a member of the bank's Monetary Council. And it was, of course, as we know, an important period. It was the years of the financial crisis, of its aftermath, but also the years of the coming to power of Viktor Orban's government. Since then, Professor Király has been back to research and teaching. She holds actually a professorship in finance and monetary economics at the International Business School in Budapest, and is also a research fellow at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Setting up this meeting today, we have asked our two panelists to reflect on the reasons behind the loss of faith in the promises of the free market, in the promises of economic liberalism in their home country. So what or who were the driving forces behind the illiberal turn in the economic sphere? What factors have contributed to this development? And we would, of course, also like to hear more about your very personal experiences. How did these changes become manifest in your own field of banking and finance primarily? And in order to get some idea about chronologies, I would like to switch the range here, starting first with Professor Király, if everybody agrees to that, and then we would switch to Professor Gronkiewicz-Waltz. The idea was giving our speakers about 15-ish minutes, more or less, to comment on these initial questions, and then we will have a first round of questions and discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for the introduction. Good afternoon for everybody. It's really a very nice hot day in Vienna. It's a hot day in Budapest as well, so for me it's relaxed to be here instead of in a city with 33 degrees. To add 2 moments to my introduction, I was nominated as a deputy governor of the Central Bank of Hungary, responsible for financial stability, in July of 2007. As you remember, in 2 weeks' time, all the financial market collapsed and the great global financial crisis started. During the crisis, I was always joking that the crisis started when I was nominated, so please wait a little. My term is only for 6 years, and as a matter of fact, when I resigned in 2013, if you remember, in 1 month's time, the crisis was over. So some of my former colleagues asked me that, couldn't you resign a little bit earlier, let's say. So I am really like a black cat. I was born in the socialism that it collapsed. I managed to collapse it in 30 years. So I hope that even I will survive the Orban regime as well. As a black cat of the Orban regime, I worked a lot. So the original question was that why fading the liberalism? What were the main reasons for the decline of popularity of liberal principles? 3rd of April of this year, we had elections in Hungary. we were more or less convinced that it will be a very, very narrow elections. We could not believe that the joint opposition can win, but during some nights, even we were wondering, dreaming about the possibility that, let's say, the Salzburg is a very good football team, Kisvárda, which is a small town in Hungary. The Kisvárda can beat the Bayern München in München. Yeah, so it's credible. It was our hope for winning the elections. I was one of those economic advisors who worked for the opposition. And 3rd of April, we lost the elections, not by a narrow margin, but the Fidesz, the Orban regime, again won by 2/3. It was a shock. It was a shock for the whole country. It was a shock for us. If we lost 48, 52, I would say that, okay, there is something in that country. Now we cannot say that it was an accident. The opposition was a joint opposition. For the Orban government, it's now the consecutively the first time that they win with 2/3. It's simply incredible. And the elections were, okay, not fair, but clean. They were not cheated. We cannot say that they simply didn't let the people to vote. No, people voted for the Orban regime. And that is the question, that is the big puzzle. Did something happen, or that's the normality? I think most of you have heard several times Ivan Krastev, who is one of the best political scientists of this region of the world. And according to his theory, when we changed the system in 1989, 1990, people wanted to live a normal life, which at that time meant that we would like to live in a normal country, which is like a normal Western country. So according to theory, it was the imitation which the regime shift brought with itself. And which failed, it was the imitation program. It's impossible simply to imitate another country. These revolution of 89, 90, no matter whether they were silent revolution or quite bloody revolutions, they really did not bring any new idea. They simply wanted to sit on the train and travel to Vienna as fast as possible. Yeah, it's a possible explanation. The other explanation we very often hear, and probably you have met with Bálint Magyar. I don't know whether he was invited to the university, but I suppose that he was. Bálint has elaborated a fantastic work, economic sociology, I can say, where he reconstructed the systems of the Eastern countries, stating what is his main message, that there are so stubborn structures which simply survive, and that's why the informal politics which determined the old socialist system can be recognized in the post-socialist countries. We cannot describe these countries with the old dichotomy that autarky versus democratic liberal democracy. We need much more explanatory factors. And anyhow, we should recognize in all these countries these stubborn structures. In that sense, according to him, Hungary is the closest country to Russia. And in his terminology, it's a kind of mafia state. I don't like this terminology, but what it covers, it's really true. So that is the second explanation, that actually nothing happened. The third one, which is recognized in several other political scientists, is that, for example, András Körössényi, that Hungary is a kind of special case. It's because of Orban. He calls it the Orban regime. And according to him and several of the proponents of this theory, Orban could organize as a personality such a system, which we cannot find in any other Eastern European countries. So don't look for the similarities, look for the diversity of this country. I have to admit that I am somewhere a hesitating person. So I couldn't say that who is right, Krastev, Magyar, or Körössényi, whether it's really the same for all the East European post-socialist countries, or really it's only Hungary because of Orban, who is a fantastic organizer, and we cannot deny that in some sense a great politician, winning the elections 4 times with 2/3, it's not an accident. As a Hungarian, I feel that this country is somehow different. Let's take an example. What is the most brutal nowadays? What we feel as is really the most shocking event. It is the Russian aggression against Ukraine, about which you were talking in the past days. All the former socialist countries have solidarity with Ukraine, all of them. Poland in the first place, even Romania, Bulgaria, who were very much Russian at the time. There is one country where you do not feel solidarity, and it's Hungary. People simply lost the feeling of solidarity. Orban Viktor could win the 4th time because he explained to the Hungarian nation that we do not want to meddle in the dispute of 2 foreign countries. It's not your business. The opposition would like you to involve in this war. Europe would like to enter in this war. We Hungarians should take a position which is not an involvement, because it's not our business. It's not your business. I will defend you from the war. You should feel safe. And with this narrative, he won 2/3. I am not convinced that this narrative, it's only due to Orban Viktor. This narrative was successful because there were the people who accepted it. Hungarians were those who had the best living standard before the transformation crisis. Do not forget that the Kádár regime was named as Gulyás communism. We had high-level living, even compared with Austria. Okay, at a lower level, but nevertheless, it was a socialist deficit country, but nevertheless, at the best, among the best. After the transformation, people realized that the promise that we will be like Austria is not fulfilled. What's more than 1 million lost their job. All the old and well-functioning, okay, in the socialist system, well-functioning big corporations were closed, and people lost as compared with their living standards in the Canada regime. It means that their ears are open for everybody who says that we will defend you, we will not let you to be involved in the war. Your living standard will be the same as it was. What's more, it will be permanently increasing. And it means that liberalism was never popular actually in Hungary. In the 89, 90, we believed the promise, Hungarian people believed that they will live at Austrian standards. They were not open for the liberalism. They were open for a new higher living standard. And they were never open for what is very important in liberal democracy, the individual strengths, that I am the individual who is responsible for myself, for my life. They always were waiting for the solution of their life from above. And the social liberal governments kept saying that you are over-consuming and we need, unfortunately, austerity. It was the message of the social liberal governments from the 2000s till the crisis. During the crisis, they lost again everything. I think later we can speak still about the financial developments in the country. And that's why they are open for the illiberal nationalist ideas, because for them, we Hungarians, we manage to keep out ourselves from the war. Foreign nations, we Hungarians, we can defend ourselves, and that is the most important for us. I'm very sorry to say that I think that liberalism is not fading. It has never existed in that country.
Thank you so much, Professor Kirai, for your very brief and quick and well-structured answer with many hypotheses to follow up. Before we give the voice to Hanna Gronkiewicz-Waltz, I just wanted to catch up on one little detail that you mentioned, an important detail, by the way, namely that you were involved in the election campaigns as an economic advisor, as an expert, of course. But just to give us a little idea, is the expert community in Hungary, how is it divided, along which lines?
It's a very good question. So we were surprised because, and it explains a little bit about the liberalism in Hungary. It was an exercise of the intelligence, of the educated people. As in the 90s, such in the 2000s, you will not find in Hungary any liberal economist. As a matter of fact, I haven't found neither my students nor my colleagues. If we want to organize a debate with illiberal economists who are economists, okay, not politicians, you cannot find. So unfortunately, we have to discuss with ourselves. But it means that something is wrong with us. We do not understand what's going on in the country. We do not understand that while as a how to say, economist responsible for the equilibrium of the country, we do not like either the rightist nor the leftist demagogy. And fighting against it, maybe we are not left-oriented enough. I am sure that in the near future, there are new left radical young people in the country. And I would not be surprised if in 10, 15 years, they would be much more successful than we were.
Which is, yes, already an optimistic outlook. We're we'll discuss the outlook further in a little while. So in other words, you say, or should I understand it that way, that the liberal impulses were purely coming from outside? Okay, very interesting. We will follow up on that, I hope. But now I would like, the bells are chiming. I hope they do not interfere with Professor Gronkiewicz-Waltz hearing us and us hearing her. You hear us well, I hope? Yeah, there's an issue with the loudspeakers. Yeah, apparently you are muted. Is it possible?
Okay.
Or...
And now can
Yes,
you hear
now
me?
we can hear you.
Okay,
Perfect.
okay.
Wonderful. Okay,
So,
I would pose the same question as before, as to Professor Kirai, to you. If you can give a short statement of your assessment of the situation and its roots in Poland. Thank you.
okay, so thank you very much for this invitation to take part in the discussion, because in the view of the election results in different countries, this topic of the crisis of liberal democracies has become very timely, and I would say even very fashionable. Almost I can use en vogue. So I will base myself, of course, on my experience in Poland. But when I was preparing, my notes, I also considered that in majority of the countries, you can find universal character of this crisis, of liberal democracy. In Poland, it was a little bit different, because in Poland we were we had private enterprises under the Gierek regime, under the communist regime. The agriculture was completely private, almost, except the western part of Poland. So in fact, people, they approach is very much on concentrated on the market economy, very liberal views, at least in the beginning. And of course, the situation has been changed. What is interesting, that both Kaczynski and Orban, they were anti-communist before the 89, and so it's very interesting, the shifts into the very, I would say, authoritarian style of executing the power. But when I was thinking about the reasons why it was happened that the liberal democracy is not so popular even now in Poland, so I think that it was the very growing feeling among average people that they are not participating in the benefits of the economy. The numbers, the figures were very good, but they didn't feel that they can afford many things to buy, or they can afford to have an apartment. We have a quite severe crisis with the apartment because of the interest rate, inflation, etc. I will tell you a little bit later. Of course, we had also, however, not so significant, not so severe like the other countries, but we had to survive during the economic crisis, and of course, the situation of people wasn't better. It was rather worse, and it was worse for the workers, for the average person, so they decided to vote for the first time in 2005, so before the crisis, for Kaczynski Party for Law and Justice. The second reason connected with the first is that it was stratification, division between society and the elite, has a very much also psychological dimension. Often politicians, they didn't give enough, I would say, respect, dignity. They think that they know better and everything will go as it was before. Before, it means in the 90s, in the beginning of the 90s. So also what is important, especially in Poland, that the message which the populist politicians were giving, it was the importance also of values like patriotism, and in Poland, religion, yes, and that it should be supported by the state. And if you compare the situation of Solidarność in the 80s, is completely different, because the church at the time was, of course, supported Solidarność very strongly. We know about it, Father Popiełuszko, and not only him, but he's the most known person. But in 2005, peace, law, and justice was supported by the church, and this is a big difference, in Poland. However, the society is becoming more laïc, but it doesn't mean that there is a big group of people who, of course, think, oh, church, our priest, votes for law and justice, so it means we have to do the same. And they do it voluntarily, because they voluntarily go to the church, but sometimes they don't have their own opinion, so they take the opinion of the priest. So I think that also the social changes, sometimes especially the left, they try to introduce before the mind of people, the way of thinking has been changed. So it means all these moral changes were too quick for the majority of the people. And what was also very important, the migration, the problem of immigrants. People, they were scared that they take the jobs, the state aid, stability, because it's very easy to blame stranger, to blame foreign people. So it was so strong, so strong protest against the 7,000 immigrants from Syria, which was accepted by the prime minister at the time in 2008 and 9. So there is a special, attitude towards Ukrainians, which is even difficult, to understand, because we have problems in our history with Ukrainians as well, not only with our neighbors, but the people were so open since the beginning. They were so how to say, they understood the situation, and I was surprised how it was this attitude towards people who are coming. It was altogether over 3 million. Some of them, they stayed longer, some of them decided to go further to the west. So I think that these are the important situation. These are the important things why it was changed. And also, I would like to say a few words about the EU, because law and justice, in a very clever way, just said that we are not sovereign. Before it was Moscow, now it's Brussels, yes, and these are the reason of our dependence, and we have to be a really sovereign country. We are a very rich country. People are clever. They are very religious. We can have a respect to our own values, and this is the moment when we can say to the EU, no. The specific example, the worst example, was when they voted against Tusk, yes, to take the second term of the president of the Council of Europe, European Council. So I think that this was, and it was. I still remember this situation in the airport when Kaczynski gave the flowers to Szydło, to the prime minister, that congratulations that you won. Of course, she lost, but she won. And it was possible. And I think that Kaczynski was a very good pupil of Orban, because they had the meetings together, and Orban arrived to Poland, to the mountains, with the with the papers, and he explained to Kaczynski what to do step by step, point by point, to take the TV, to take the constitutional tribunal, and of course the judiciary. So in fact, the revolution of information changed also very much. They got young people, and these people, they will use this new how to say, new instruments of the communication. So tweets, Twitter, and Facebook, and Instagram, and many others. So because, however, in Poland, I don't know how it is exactly in Hungary, but the public television is not public anymore. It's a party television, and the things which the people can listen and can hear and understand are completely not connected with the truth. But people are, I would say, this kind of believers. It's like a religion. So, for example, the people who are quite not even poor people, they say, no, I can survive because now it's fine. Kaczynski is like Napoleon, and he knows what to do and how to win. So this is the situation, and in fact, however, after 2 years, Kaczynski in 2007 lost the power. He decided to dissolve the parliament, and he lost the elections. He failed. But then it was 2 terms of civic platform, and then it was again two terms of law and justice. So the situation, and they have very strong support in the opinion polls. So they are still number 1, and the civic platform and the coalition is on the second place. And in fact, people, of course, the problem, is with the opposition. We admire very much the Hungarian opposition, that they could go together to the elections. But as Julia said, despite of this, it was 2/3 won by Orban. So it's very, very sad information for me, to me. So what I can say, now people in Poland, they are very fragile of the inflation. Inflation is 14%, so it's very high, and is the way how they can lose the power, but it's not for sure, because people hate really the inflation. We remember the hyperinflation in the end of the 80s, and so and usually this is the government which is blame. So in this case, is the government of Kaczynski. I think that the system changed a lot. If you ask me 10 years ago that these things could happen in Poland, I would say never ever. It's not possible, because we are used to private enterprises, to private jobs, because it was, as I mentioned already in the beginning, already under the socialism. So, and suddenly the people, they decided to change their mind. I think that it's quite important, the support of the church, in the Polish case. This is typical for Poland, and of law and justice. And what is very important, that the rules of law is completely forgotten. So in the case of this recovery fund, which is offered by the EU, at the end it was open, but it will be controlled. I hope it will be controlled and checked very, very cautiously by the EU. But the EU is also viewed as the very elite club, and and there is very much anti-German propaganda in our TV, which I couldn't believe how it can be in harmony with the statement of the bishops, Polish bishops in the 60s. You remember that they wrote a letter to the bishops of German bishops. We forgive you and forgive us. So it was. So I don't know how it can be packed in the same box, everything. But so I think I'm a little bit optimistic, but not over optimistic. And the elections will be next year, so we see what will happen. I think that the very important issue that should be solved is the issue of place or apartments, for for youngsters, for people who are graduated and they decide to go abroad or not. So I think who will solve this problem, so it will have bigger support. And of course, the only possibility, and Tusk just do it, you can speak to individual people and you have to make these shake hands promises and maybe the situation will change. Thank you. If you would like to ask me something more, I am happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Professor Gronkiewicz-Waltz, for your also very time-disciplined answer. You were, I think, as a mayor of Warsaw, you were, of course, close with your ears to the voice of the people in a long term from 2006 and 2018. I would like to come back to one aspect which you mentioned, and this links to my initial comment that Poland and Hungary are often seen as influencing each other when it comes to reform paths, especially also in the economic sphere. And this is, you said that Kaczynski actually turned out to be a very good pupil of Orban, and you mentioned
however, he's older, but he was a good pupil.
I'm sorry, he's older, yes.
I said he's older than Orban.
That doesn't always, play such a big role in knowledge transfers and transfer of ideas. But would you say that he learned economic tricks and strategies if you would compare the electoral campaigns of peace in 2011, which were not successful, compared to those of 2015, with the experience of already 5 years of Orban government in Hungary? Is there also, apart from the immigration trope and so on, is there an economic aspect that has been copied or adapted when it comes to welfare promises or other aspects?
Yes, I think that first of all, the opposition was not in one block. So it's because we have the system which is called the system of don't. Yes, so it gives an extra seats, for those who have even not so high for those who are the first, it gives much more than for the coalition, for the opposition, who was the second in the opinion polls and then in the elections. So I think that it was one of the reasons, and it was the moment of the immigration of this issue was very much, discussed by the Law and Justice, and said that you would like to have so many people to come to Poland. So it was very dangerous. What else? I think that it was not, the opposition was not unified during the different during the voting in the parliament. It was one of the reasons. And at the end, I can say that the situation, economic situation, was very good. So people wanted to prolong the situation. And I think that it was a very strong, by the way, I was active in the church. I'm not against the church, but the church was very active to convince the people to vote only for law and justice. I was trying in my environment, which I have, to do different things, but it was very difficult, especially in the small towns and in the cities. And they had, and I should say, and I should admit that they were very well prepared to the elections. So Kaczynski understood, if you compare Kaczynski in 2005 and even in the 90s, he will do what the public relations people will tell him. He is very, very much obedient. On one hand, he's a very independent person, yes, and he always wants to run everything. But in the case of public relations, he do what the people say. When the people say kick off this guy because he's not good and he can be very good, he will do it. And I think that this was the reason for the victory of law and justice. And we have many people who don't vote because they don't like this, they don't like the left, they don't like right, and they think that if they have imagination to create an ideal leader, so they would vote for him, but never for Tusk, never for Kaczynski, only for the ideal person. And the turnover, the participation in the elections is quite low in Poland, unfortunately. It's less than 50%. I don't know how it is in Hungary, but it's very low in Poland. But the people, on the other hand, maybe one sentence, you know, that is true that it was direct election that I won. Of course, the big cities are much more liberal, you know, than the small cities. So it was easier. But people only they look at the what you have done, and if you the fight against me was very horrible, very cruel. But I survived, so I could come here. So not come, but I wanted very much to come. I couldn't. But so I think that it was people think you have the street, you have the underground subways in construction. This bridge wasn't here, now it's a new bridge. So it's this is easier in big cities to win. Thank you.
Professor, yes. Thank you very much for this additional comment. What struck me a bit was that that the peace strategy is so how should I phrase it? Is intentionally divisive, somehow speaking to the perceived or self-perceived losers of transformation, and we have for many years this Polska A, Polska B, like the more progressive, or however you should call it, modern, Western-oriented Poland, and the more insulated, traditional part. We have this distinction in the discourse for many years. In Hungary, my impression, and I'm not an expert at all, is that the strategies of Orban were not to divide the society into the losers whom we can speak to and the more liberal, successful part of the society, which is more EU-oriented, but that there the benefits of the future economic politics would be a much bigger, what he labeled middle class, which can incorporate up to 2/3 of society. So it's a totally different approach whom to speak to and how to define national interests.
While Hanna was speaking, I was thinking about the very interesting contradiction. Hungary and Poland are quite opposite economic system. Poland is the closest economy in Europe. If you measure it by export plus import per GDP, in Poland is around 110%. Hungary is the most open European economy. Export plus import per GDP is around 200%. You will not find any country like this. So an open country, what does it mean? If you have an open country, you have to run a policy with people who are living in an open country. If people are living in an open country, it means that people are open. They are open for the European liberal ideas. And here is the dichotomy of the Hungarian society. We are the closest country in Europe because we are closed in our language. You will not believe, but from Hungary, is the lower level of emigration. In Poland, the emigration ratio was extremely high already before the transformation, and it kept very high after the transformation. 20% of the Baltic countries are living outside the Baltic countries. From Bulgaria, 20% of the population emigrated. In Hungary, it's still at a very low level. And first of all, because we are closed in our language. 2/3 of the population are living without being able to read the internet in international language. It's not so difficult for Mr. Orbán to close these people. They can read only Hungarian. He really manipulates, he really manages 90% of the Hungarian media. And it's just enough, because these people will not read any other language. He shouldn't close the internet. It's free. Hungary is free and will always be free. So you live with a population in the most open country of Europe, with people who are very much closed in their own life, who are still convinced that to be Hungarian is the best thing on the world. We are Hungarian. I still can remember a few years ago, I had a debate with a very, very good friend of mine. And he's a devoted Fidesz voter. He's a devoted Orbán voter. And I told him that, hey, look how do they build the new capitalists. These new capitalists, which are promoted by Orbán, all belong to the wide political family of Orbán. The wealthiest man in Hungary, who is a childhood friend of Orbán, increased his wealth at a higher pace than Zuckerberg. It was a big joke, but it's true, so it's not a joke, it's true. He was increasing his wealth at a higher speed than the wealthiest guys on the world. So his family, his political family is growing and having more and more wealth. They told this to my friend, and do you know what he answered? But it is in Hungarian hands, not in foreign hands. We hate the foreigners. And that is what Orbán is playing on. That is his main card, that we are Hungarians, we have to defend ourselves because everybody is attacking us. And I am the only guy who understands you. Otherwise, you would be losers, and it's true, because you do not speak any other language. You are not open for the outside world, and you would be really losers in a multicultural, in a global world. That's what we learned in the past few years.
But Orbán speaks English and Kaczynski doesn't speak any language.
It's another contradiction, true.
Another contradiction, exactly.
Orbán is a guy who perfectly understands what is in the outside world. That's why he knows what not to transfer to his people. Kaczynski speaks only Polish. So Kaczynski really believes what he says. Orbán doesn't believe, but can do it.
I'm not sure if Kaczynski really believes in everything. She's maybe more convinced to some problems, but he doesn't believe. He can be very, very cynical, you know.
Very interesting exchange of remarks. I think the profit of comparing the Polish and Hungarian cases is already obvious, because we come across so many differences when it comes to openness and closeness, and also the use of economic nationalism for political purposes. And I think we could go on talking about this for a long time, but I think looking at the time, I would like to open up, because we've been speaking quite a lot now here on the podium. We would like to open up for questions from the audience, which have been collected by Yanis. So.
Thank you very much for this very insightful presentations. In a way, social economic policy was mentioned. At least in the case of Poland, it is fairly obvious that the PiS government was winning also elections on these grounds, trying to correct issues that liberal governments before have probably mismanaged. In Hungary, it's probably a little bit more difficult, but there is also some social policy issue at stake, as you also mentioned. And also the housing issue was mentioned, because now we see that the generations that were able to privatize the flats that they were living in, but they don't have the problem, but the young families have really difficulties to find affordable housing. Is it so difficult for the opposition to, for instance, jump on such a very simple topic and offer, for instance, a really broad-based housing policies? As we speak here and sit here in Vienna, a city where basically social housing policies were almost invented in the interwar period, wouldn't that be a way to go forward for the opposition?
If I may answer, of course, the opposition says that nothing will be taken out, none of this 500 plus, for each child, etc. And now I understand that the last meeting of Tusk with the people, because he travels around Poland nowadays. So he said that the housing residence can't be anymore the things which you have to buy, but it's kind of right, which is the left slogan. But he incorporated it. I think that it can be possible that the program, when it will be written, it will be something about the possibility for the young people to solve the housing problem. And I'm sure that something will be. We had a special program which was called, I have to translate very quickly, the apartment for the youngsters, and the PIS, as you said, Law and Justice. They didn't solve this problem at all. They said it will be 1 million apartments, but they did maybe a few thousand, yes, constructed. So this will be solved. And I understand that Tusk understood that, there is no space and place for liberal policy at the moment. So even the parties like a civic platform, they have to offer something to the people from this social package. And for example, in Warsaw, we had, we have kindergarten for free. We have very good public transport, I would say, very cheap still until now. I don't know how it will be with this inflation, but we cover, our budget covers 40% of cost of the public transport. And at the same time, there are a lot of investment. So, and the social issue, have to be taken into account. Thank you.
I may add some words from Hungary. So, first of all, you have to understand that post-socialist Eastern countries are the countries where the private property of housing is the highest in Europe, above 90% privately owned, all the flats. It was the first property, but the post-socialist countries people could buy. And that's why, for example, in Germany, this ratio is less than 50%. So it's a big problem. We have a bad historical package. I mean, the social liberals, because in the 2000s, when the first Fidesz government, the first Orbán government was in power, they provided subsidized loan for the people. the subsidy for this loan put such a burden on the budget that they had to be stopped. And it was stopped by the social liberals, unfortunately. What is even worse, they let then the increase of the Swiss franc denominated loans. And the Hungarian housing crisis is because of the FX lending crisis. It was a social tragedy. I lived it in the central bank. As a central bank, we had no right to regulate or to supervise. We were a non-regulatory and non-supervising central bank, and we could simply watch while 70% of the total loans consisted of Swiss franc denominated loans. As soon as the financial crisis came, these loans went bankrupt, and hundred thousands of people lost their home. They do not believe that the social liberals can help them, so they are expecting the help from the Orban government. Unfortunately, during the pre-crisis movement, we have not put enough stress on the new housing policy. So we have it. It was elaborated by some really young and new leftist people, and they have solutions for the social housing questions. They have very good proposals. Unfortunately, during the campaign, it was not stressed enough, and I think it was one of the major mistakes, so I agree with you. It's an extremely important question.
Yes, exactly. If I can translate, because I lost the word. So what Tusk said, it was apartment anymore, commodity only the right, or something like this. And we in Poland, we had also these francs credit in francs, but a little bit less, I think, in proportions. And in fact, who saved us, all of us, the European Tribunal, who allowed for different not market oriented solutions for this. And since because our national courts, they said no, it's a contract, this is a contract, and the European Tribunal said a little bit different way that it should be the right of consumers should be guaranteed. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you for answering to the question of the social incentives, which are also quite selective. This is a broader topic still, but we have another question in the back row.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you both for the very insightful talk. And my question would go to Professor Király. And it's on the perception of economic prosperity for the Hungarian individuals since Orban rose to power. One of my childhood friends is from Hungary. I've been to Budapest with him a couple of times, and I have talked to his mother a couple of times, who has always been a very avid Orban voter, at least for the last 4 elections. And her main argument always was that he brought prosperity for her and for her family for the first time since 1890, and she still owes him the vote any election that's going to come. And my question would be, how much of this prosperity that maybe she feels or many other voters also feel is now also a very well constructed narrative that Orban still continues? And how do you approach this, especially from an oppositional perspective that you were in now in the last elections? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it cannot be denied that between 2010 and 2018, Hungary was on a fast-growing path, economic path, at a lower rate than any other former socialist country in the region. But people are not looking outside. They realize that we are after 6 very tragical crisis year, and now we are going upward. And he really provided the people the very wide safety net. It was a low-level safety net, but even he provided public work in the villages where people could not work earlier. He provided pension for the pensioners and increasing real wage. So in the past, and before the pandemic, it was really a fast-growing economy. It's true that 20 or 30% financed by EU funds, but that is why we provide EU funds for the country, to get closer to the developed countries. I think that now he will face a very serious problem. High inflation. In Hungary, there is very severe price control on the energy and on the food, manually price control. So there is a price cap. And in spite of it, we have a double-digit inflation. The Achilles part of Hungary, that is the foreign equilibrium, the foreign stability, it's deteriorating. This year, the balance of payment will be -7% of the GDP, which means that we cannot have access to any more debt from the open market. So for the Orban government is now of utmost interest to get access to the EU funds. There are still talks. I don't know what will be the final outcome. If it will be too late or it will not arrive, then he will face a very serious economic problem. I mentioned that he built a new capitalist class, which are very close to the party. But if you measure the inequality by income, it was not increasing during the past 10 years, but more it was decreasing. So from income point of view, the society is more equal. If you measure the wealth inequality, the society is tragically unequal. It means that the future of those who are at the bottom of the society, their possibilities are worsening. But the feeling in the past 10 years was that we are getting safety, higher living standard, and again, safety.
If I can add,
I wanted to ask you.
in Polish case, the government dismantled the budget because they recreated the funds, different funds. So you have maybe 10, 11 pockets, and in fact, we don't know for sure how big is budget deficit. We know that it's exceeded 4%, so it's for sure. But they find this money, another money, and of course there is this so-called by the public, they're printing the money because the inflation is going every month, about 1%. We have very dependent central bank because in fact the person who is the head of the central bank, he is the former colleague from the party, and for example, he was voted. The first governor who was voted for the second term, he didn't come to the parliament, he came to the headquarters of the Law and Justice, and it was asked only by the members of the ex-com, I would say, of the party. And he is, if it's necessary to weaken zloty, just which is good for the budget, so he does it. And when he earned very strong profit, which is not the task of the central bank, yes, and the profit is 97% of the profit is paid to the budget. So in fact, there are many, I would say, artificial, incomes of the budget, and of course the local governments, they are deprived of the incomes because for example, the government decreased the personal income tax from 70% to 12%, but it means that local government won't have money for the basic task like education, etc. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions. We start from the lady in the second row.
Yeah. My name is Dagmara Jajeśniak-Past. I am from European University Viadrina and the German-Polish border. And since we are here on the Research Center for History of Transformation, may I ask you a personal question, maybe using the oral history, and ask you, do you think you find maybe some personal mistakes? Because you used to be, and you are a very important actor in this transformation processes, some mistakes that are maybe also on the way to this illiberal economics in your personal activities?
Is the question to me?
To
Yes.
both you.
Both, okay. So I think, you have such saying, you have that, if you don't do anything, you don't make mistakes. So, so I think that first of all, as the governor, I think that we had very strong supervision in comparison to the other countries. Our banks were in a very good shape. In the case when I was in the BRD, so it was different experience, but I learned a lot, I should say, at the BRD from my colleagues who were educated in the Western countries, not like me in Poland. And if you take, the situation when I was the mayor of Warsaw, so I think that it was many things which were not solved on the which are not solved by the state, like the case of reprivatization, which was solved in Hungary, in Czechoslovakia, never in Poland. So I couldn't make the thing which was not in my competence. So this if you take the not only me but the government, so people say that we shouldn't increase the retirement age, which we increased from 60 for women to 67 years, and it was a big mistake, and we lost the votes, many votes. So, but it was reasonable, but not politically good. So just I think about these different things.
As far as the transformation is concerned, at that time I was a simple mother. I just gave birth to my son, so I haven't done anything in the 89 and 90. I was a nobody, just a little, yeah, I was carrying my child. But of course, the question is more serious, because anyhow, we were those intellectuals who somehow supported this transformation process, and we supported those governments who, the social liberal governments. So if you ask me in one sentence, I am much more leftist than I used to be. But I am still liberal, because I believe in the individual values, I believe in the individualism, I believe in the liberal democracy, but I am much more leftist. So I would stress much more the social programs, housing, education, healthcare, social system, if I could start again. And as my role as deputy governor of the central bank, I put up my arms and said that I cannot do anything against FX lending. I should have tried to do anyhow something. So never feel that you are instrumentless. You have always a possibility to act if you are convinced that it's a bad process. So these are my lessons from the past.
Very personal. I didn't dare to ask the questions, but I'm very happy that Dagmara Jajeśniak-Past put these up because the answers were so interesting. We continue with Janos Kovac.
Yeah, do you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So the past seems very frustrating. So let's look into the bright future and let's talk about the emerging crisis. So what do you think about this crisis? Is it, we see inflation, will it be a stagflationary or a slumflationary crisis? Will there be economic recession? Will this be a world event? I know that these are big questions, but you are liberal scholars. I'm sure you have an opinion about this. And the final question, so is there a liberal way of managing this crisis, the coming crisis, or as usual, economic crisis will breed interventionist politicians? And then we have at least new economic dictators.
I will start and then Anna.
Yes.
It will be
Go
a
ahead.
very difficult crisis. It will less dramatic than the global financial crisis in some sense, because the financial system is much more safe and will not collapse. It means if there will be a recession, will be a milder recession, but it will be a coming recession together inflation. In the US, it's already clear cut. In this region, because these countries are very much open, especially Hungary. Poland is always another case. So in Hungary, we will survive a slowing down economy with a very high inflation and with a high budget deficit. It will be not easy. It can be survived, but will not be easy. I hope that those young, new leftist economists whom I mentioned, they will have much more strength, much more power, and much more influence. And in that case, not Orban will be the next regime, not he will form the next regime. It's maybe a little bit surprising, even my friends are surprised by me, but I felt that Hungarian people really need those solutions which helps their life to transform better. And these answers are coming from the left and not from the very liberal economists. So I would give my place to my younger generation.
I think you know that this crisis, it depends very much on the war between Russia, the invasion of Russia to Ukraine, because we don't know how long it will be, and it can be quite long war. And we have to remember that Ukraine exports a lot of products of agriculture, and it will have an impact also in Europe, but as well in Africa, in other countries. So it can be hunger. You know, this I'm afraid. Maybe I don't think I exaggerate. So I think that it can be more difficult. I think that the crisis between 2008 and 2012 was quite mild crisis. Everybody was afraid that it would be longer and more severe, but it wasn't. And in this case, because of the behavior unpredictable of Russia, it will be politically and economically more difficult. And I think in the case of Poland, is generally it's very difficult to predict something. I always remember the sentence of my professor of history at school. She said, "Who would know who is Prince Ferdinand?" But the First World War started from the assassination of Ferdinand. So I think that no, not so many people knew him. It was not the Kaiser, yes. So sometimes there is a very small, I would say, very small accident, very small situation, which can lead to that tragedy. I think that this case, the many examples is like this about the Prince Ferdinand. So it depends on the different people, you know, in different places, and how they can solve the problem. You see, the situation in Ukraine is we are very close to this, and so maybe I'm concentrated on this issue, but I think that it's very important how the Germans behave. Macron, they don't know how to tackle with this issue completely, in my opinion. I said once that in the case of Macron, he still remembers that Napoleon had to run away from Moscow. So this is the problem, you know, which will be important, you know, the relationship between Russia and the rest of the world. This is
Thank
my
you.
answer.
Yes. Are you finished? I'm sorry. I don't
No,
know.
I said this is my answer. That's
Thank you so much. Thank you, Janos, for bringing up the question of future prospects. We know this was something we wanted to cover, and this reminds us of the fact that everything is so volatile at the moment that prognoses are very difficult to make. And the more optimistic is Professor Kirai's hope in the new generation and the trust that they will find solutions to whatever challenges we're going to meet. We still have, I think, 1, 2 at least questions. So we continue with Nino Gele.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me? Yes.
yes.
So thank you very much. It's this very exciting event, and I have maybe at the end one question, but I start with comment. I have this feeling, I feel myself such this guy in Senate who use each opportunity to say Carthago must be destroyed. So we should go beyond the European borders. Sometimes I have this feeling that dealing with European questions and European future visions and prospects, and in regard with post-socialist transformations, we somehow, forgot that this post-socialist world goes beyond the European borders, and the transformations what we face nowadays goes also beyond the European borders. I am from Georgia, so I found very interesting what you said about Orban's Hungary and about this narrative statement, so to say. It's not our war, it should not be our war. Europe somehow force, or whatever, USA force us to be involved in this. And you know, first of all, I somehow doubt that it's that there is no grassroots movement against this. And then I am afraid the picture is much more complicated, and Hungary is not alone. So we have such a paradoxical phenomenon as Georgia, and Georgia after 2008. So, and from Georgian government, very similar narrative. It's should not be our war, Europe or whatever else force us to be involved. And so hundreds of thousands goes to the street and demonstrate again the government, but who cares? And and now my question, what do you think? What these guys in Georgian government or in Orban government have as a future visions for them? I'm really disappointed, and I'm really it's unfortunate development, I think, and I'm afraid. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, I am convinced that the Orban regime is not unique in the world. My favorite literature last year was the history of Africa, and especially after the colonial system. And it's a very useful reading. So I think we have the same feelings. We know the same statements. Unfortunately, I haven't heard from you the solution, but I am looking forward to, you are my new generation. So you will have to solve this problem. I am sure, but I believe very, very firmly that the Acemoglu-Robinson statement that closed empires will fail, it's true. So they will fail, they will collapse. When? That's the big question. And what will come after? That's what gives strength. Okay.
If I may, if I may say, I think that, you know, the history is run quite strongly by individuals. I recall the position of Churchill, who in fact he was the only one who decided to say no. At the end, he won. However, he lost the elections after the war, but he won the next elections. After next. So I think that it depends on the individuals very much. You can like or not Wałęsa, but if it's not Wałęsa, I don't know who could run, you know, this strike at the time. So I strongly believe in the role of the individual people, especially strong characters. And what can happen, you know, in these countries. You know, you have always such saying, you know, we remember like one person from France said, you know, we won't die for Gdańsk, you know. However, I always dispute with my colleague in Libya. They said, oh, it was only one guy and he was not so popular in France. Okay, but we remember this. And so I think that it's, you know, Kościuszko and Pułaski, they decided to fight for the in the United States. So it depends around a lot of the individuals who will appear or not appear, you know, in our history. So it's difficult to predict. But you have always, like under communists, you had people who wanted to fight against communists and against totalitarian system, and it was usually the minority. But they were doing this, like Kuro and Michnik, many others, you know, who were in Poland. But this was a small group, you know, small group, and at the beginning, and you had always, you know, the people who are opportunists, and even you can't have anything against them because they have this character. They are brought up this way, you know, in family. How they can behave different way, because when mother and father used to say, be quiet, because something wrong is happened. So, you know, my father he was fighting in the Warsaw insurrection, so I was brought up a little bit different. That you have to say, it depends a lot of you. You can't go to the 1st May manifestation because it's not. It's obligatory, it's forceful. So many other things, I don't want to tell my story, but anyway, it depends on the person and on the character, on the bringing up at home, and also at school. However, school brought up me in different way, but I was not so much devoted to this way. Okay, this I wanted to share with you.
Thank you, Nina, for bringing in your perspective. And we have, I think, one more question.
Yeah, Ms. Kirli, I would like to ask you a question about the economic model of Mr. Orban. You mentioned this ratio, import-export versus GDP. It's very high in Hungary, but I think it's the export sector who is foreign-owned, car manufacturing, for example. On the other hand, we have these national sectors like construction, hotels, and so on, which is in the hands of this, I don't know, oligarchs of Orban. So what does that mean for the future of the economy of the country? I mean, will there be some tensions, or, I mean, it's not a healthy situation for long-term wealth.
It is really the weakest point of the Orban regime. Yeah. So they are controlling around 30-35% of the GDP, but it's all the services which can be sold within the country. And they are very weak in the export sector. The export sector is partly controlled by FDI, that is multinationals, and partly those Hungarian corporations which evolved during the past 30 years, because we have some, not very high share, but anyhow we have. And it's definitely the biggest point of the Orban regime. That's why he is so much relying on the EU funds, because he needs that finance. Otherwise, the system is starting to collapse. But it can be a very long collapse.
Like in Cuba. Long agony.
Yeah, can I don't see any question now at the moment. Can I continue? Because this was something I was wondering about myself, the FDI. Because we had this title of our presentation, of our panel today, Illiberal Economies and question mark. Thank you for pointing that out. Of course, when we have the return of the state as an interventionist force into the economy, this is one thing which reverses deregulation to a certain extent. But the other pillar of the liberal economic reforms were, of course, the open markets and the use of FDI, of participation of foreign actors on the domestic market, in the domestic economy. There, I think, I'm not really sure to what extent Hungary and Poland are comparable, because Morawiecki said a couple of years ago that Poland was a dependent market economy. In other words, that many sectors were in foreign hands. At the same time, if I understood it correctly, PiS is not categorically against foreign investments, but wants to have a selective word or a selective hand in the process. So if I could pose the question to both of you in the respect of being embraced into a larger economic entity, if it's like regional markets or global markets even, to what extent would you dare put the Polish and the Hungarian economy under the category of an illiberal economy when it comes to the openness to foreign markets?
If I may answer, no, but Morawiecki, because you gave the example of Morawiecki, at the same time he was the CEO of the one of the biggest bank, in foreign owners, yes. So it was, and now it's still, in Santander hands, the bank when he was serving for many years as the CEO. So it's, you see this double measure and this double argumentation. Of course, why mainly they would like to have a national, national enterprises, because you have the power to nominate the people, the CEO. This is the mystery of having, Polish hands in Polish hands. Now we had two banks which are state-owned. Now there is the third one, the second biggest bank, PKO, became the treasury bought the shares from the Italians, yes, in Bank PKO. So I think, but thanks to this, they could have a CEO from the nominations, and these people they are all disciplined and fulfilled what are the expectations of the government, or they can leave the post, the function. So I think that because the supporters, the youngsters who would like to make a career, and law and justice is much better in this than a civic platform. So they take these people, very, very young people, and they can nominate as the CEO of this enterprise or bank or insurance company. So this is the secret why they would like to nationalize, I would say, practically nationalize the different kind of enterprises and companies. So of course they are open for investors to a certain extent, but they prefer, of course, to buy shares from the foreign investors to have its own CEO. This story of Kaczynski about these two towers, I don't want to, which was published in Gazeta Wyborcza, it was exactly the negotiation between the CEO of the PKO SA and the developer who plans to construct these two towers. Thank you.
Hungary Caesar is just the answer I gave before, that everything which is retail, which provides services for the internal market, they first nationalize, then sell for themselves. So it's already in private hands. The second largest bank is in their hands. Everything in every other fields, they're very liberal. So Hungary, for example, not only actually one of the biggest automotive manufacturer by German multinationals. So we have Mercedes, Audi, everything. Volkswagen, we have everything. But now Hungary is the largest battery provider. So we have opened in the past 1 year at least 5 new battery companies, South Korean, Chinese, huge. The only problem with them, it's pollution, terribly polluting Hungary. But we welcome them. Their actual tax rate is 1.5%. They get so much subsidy from the government that the actual tax rate is 1.5% for these multinationals. So in that sense, the Orban government is 100% liberal.
Thank you very much. Do we have one more question? Because we have, I think, 3 minutes left. I don't see any hands at the moment. I have a little, maybe it's not a little question, but a concluding question, because we already had the outlook in the future, which was also mixed. I would like to close up with the issue in Hungary and Poland, to come back to the commonalities. What has worked in the rhetoric of both PiS and Fidesz is that liberalism has somehow been connected to the communist elites. So to say, basically, that the communist elites turned liberal and somehow transformed the political power into economic power. This hasn't worked in all post-socialist countries. In Estonia, for example, the ultra-liberal transformation of the Estonian economy is always connected to the radical nationalist camp of the opposition of the late 1980s, and not to the Soviet elites, which were in the transition government. So the question is, will this narrative of the unfinished transition, the lack of the cut with the old elites, I mean, we are now more than 30 years past the events. Will this narrative hold so much longer, given that we might enter in a totally new era now at the moment, 2022?
In our case, the Kaczynski philosophy is, that our communist is good, your communist, former communist is bad. And your collaborator of the Secret Service, in my case, is good, Kaczynski says. I don't trust the court who decided that he was in cooperation with the Secret Service, and I can nominate him. It was a few days ago. I can nominate him, for the quite high position. Yes, and if it's the person who belongs to civic platform, or is horrible, he's a traitor. So you think, this is the Kali philosophy.
Hungary is an easier case or another case. The communist narrative is over, so nobody mentions that these were the communists who made the transformation. Everybody forgets. But we had a left liberal prime minister in the 2000s from 2002 till 2009, Ferenc Gyurcsány. So in Hungary, the Orban narrative that Gyurcsány who ruined the country. No matter what's happening in Hungary, even when there is an earthquake or a big storm, it's because of Gyurcsány. If you learn this name, Gyurcsány, and you enter the Hungarian border, just tell the first policeman or anybody that it's because of Gyurcsány, and you will get free way to Budapest. So no more Gyurcsány and we will win.
In our case, it's Tusk. Everything is Tusk. He is guilty of everything. If you lose the way, you know, it means that it is Tusk was doing this, you know, helping you.
Yeah, I think the guilt question is a never-ending one. But I think we stop here because it's getting hotter and hotter in the tent, and it's 4:15. I think it was a great experience to have these distinguished guests here, the two professors, Professor Király, Professor Gronkiewicz-Waltz, who we could not only profit from the expertise, from the expert knowledge we could share here with them, but talking to people who are protagonists of the most recent chapter of the history of transformation in Poland and Hungary. So it was a big honor and it was a big pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us here in Vienna. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.